So pleased to be with you all here today. I know that this is sort of an unsettled time, and I hope that what I'm here to tell you will give you some ease and help you through the process. So to get started, there we go, technology, don't we love it? To get started, what I thought I would do is just first tell you a little bit about who I am so that you know who's speaking to you. I have 26 years of experience in higher education in the areas of admissions, financial aid, retention, and even facilities and dining. If you can believe it, I'm in charge of our food services here on campus. I actually have three degrees. My first degree was a Bachelor of Arts in English Writing from the University of Pittsburgh. My second degree was a Master of Communication and Information Systems at Robert Morris University. And finally, I ended up getting a Doctorate of Education at the University of Pittsburgh. So altogether, I have spent 15 years studying in higher education. So not only have I been an administrator, but I've also been in the classroom seat as well. So I know a lot about the business. I started my career at the University of Pittsburgh, and then I moved to Robert Morris University a few years later. I spent 17 years with Robert Morris, quite a bit of time in a lot of different offices. Then I moved to Shepherd University, which is a public institution in West Virginia. And I moved to Waynesburg University probably about 5 years ago. So I've been with Waynesburg for 5 years. I actually have experience at NCAA Division I, II, and III schools. So Pitt was a major D1 school. Robert Morris is D1 ever except for football, which is D1 AA. Shepherd is a D2 school, and Waynesburg is a D3 school. So I'm also happy to answer questions if you have any athletic questions about admission. So don't hold back. But today, what we're going to talk about, I'm going to start first talking about the impact that COVID has had on higher education, and specifically what it's like for admissions and what some of the changes are. Then what I'll do is I'll spend some time focusing on seniors, juniors, and sophomores, because I know that we have a mixed crowd here today, and there are different things that you need to know based on what level you're at. So I will also leave time at the end. Please ask me anything. I'm happy to answer your questions. I know that you don't always get the opportunity to hear what the decision makers have to say. So I'm here. Don't waste the opportunity. Please feel free to ask me questions. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk about COVID and what's happening on campuses. The first thing that you need to know is that in Pennsylvania, we do have still some limitations on who can visit campus, what the guidelines are. And so if you've been following and all, you know we went into the green phase in summer, but we still do have some restrictions on who can come visit the campus. So the campus visits in Pennsylvania are usually pretty limited. If you're going to go to a campus, you're going to probably have a limited campus tour and maybe meet with like an admissions counselor, socially distanced with masks on. You'll probably have to do some sort of screening form to say that you haven't been exposed to COVID, but it'll be a more limited experience than you could usually get in a normal era. But that's Pennsylvania. Let's just say you wanted to travel to Ohio, and the guidelines in Ohio might be a little bit different, and they might be particularly different for out-of-state travelers. So if you're thinking about going to do a visit to a college that's out of state, what I would recommend is calling the admissions office first and saying, hey, what are your COVID guidelines on campus? Are there any special restrictions for out-of-state travelers? The next thing you need to know about COVID impact on higher education is that some campuses are having on-campus instruction, but others are not. Some are completely remote instruction. So take my campus, for example. We had a complete fall on-campus instruction. Now there were some limits to what students could do on campus, and they still had to follow all the social distancing rules. They had to do masks. They had to do some testing when they came back this semester. All of our students were tested on campus, but we do have on-campus instruction. And what you need to think about leading into the fall would be, you know, if I were at a particular institution, would I prefer a campus that was able to have on-campus instruction, or would I feel more comfortable with a campus that went completely remote? Just something to think about as you're thinking about the college process. Now, the virtual visit question came in through one of your questioners, and I think that that was a great question. So kudos to whoever submitted it. Good question. Pretty much all of the campuses in this area, and mostly throughout the United States, are offering virtual visits now. And virtual visits are a really great way for you to meet one-on-one, usually with an admissions counselor. Sometimes you'll be able to have a virtual visit with a coach if you're trying to be recruited for an athletic team. Some schools are sitting at virtual visits with faculty members. Some are even having virtual open houses, sort of like what we're doing now. And so the question is, if I have the opportunity to do a campus visit or a virtual visit, what should I do? I actually think you should try to do both if you can. The campus visit will give you an opportunity to view the facilities and to at least see what the campus looks like. You won't get that same feeling in a virtual visit, but you will have the opportunity in a virtual visit to get a lot of your questions answered. You don't have to go to a campus to find out what programs are offered or what the admissions process is or how to file for financial aid. You can accomplish all of those things through a virtual visit. So virtual visits are very valuable, but at some point you are going to want to do a campus visit. So I actually recommend them both. Now, the admissions processes are going to vary based on what kind of institution you're looking at. And so what I thought I would do is just take a moment to talk about what selectivity means, because selectivity really is going to determine what the COVID changes are going to be down the road. So I've broken them down for you into 3 groups. And these are sort of my own groups just to give you a good understanding. There's the high selectivity school. And that means that they're very selective in their applicant pool. So if they have 1,000 applicants, they may only admit 100 of them, which is 10%. And some of these institutions like Harvard and Yale, they admit fewer than 5% of their applicants. You see that I put Pitt and Penn State in the high selectivity, and you may wonder, well, Pitt and Penn State are pretty different than Harvard and Yale, and that's true. They're not as selective as Harvard and Yale, but as we move down through the selectivity, they are still more selective than other institutions like my own institution or like a Carlow or a Slippery Rock. So I put Penn State and Pitt in the higher selectivity because I think that moving down the road, their admissions are going to follow the same changes probably as the high selectivity group. Okay, so keep in mind those are just my definitions. The medium selectivity group would be my institution, Carlow, Slippery Rock, IUP, pretty much all of the state schools in Pennsylvania, California University of Pennsylvania, Edinburgh, they would all fall in the medium selectivity. In other words, they're going to admit a much greater proportion of students than a Harvard, a Yale, a Carnegie Mellon, but it's not open enrollment. They don't admit everybody, and you still have admission standards that you have to meet, okay? Then you have a low selectivity school, and that would be your community colleges, your technical schools, schools where the entrance requirements are basically a high school diploma or a GED or some type of proof of credential that you've completed the high school curriculum. So as long as you've done that, you usually have no testing requirements. There may not be a grade point average requirement, but those are lower selectivity schools. For this fall 2021, so someone who was graduating in June of 2021, the majority of all of the schools in the list, the entire list, everything from low selectivity to high selectivity, almost every school has waived the SAT or ACT requirement for fall 21. There shouldn't be a school around that is still going to require SAT or ACT scores. Now, sometimes what I've heard is, okay, a school told me that they were waiving this requirement. However, they're still sending me letters saying that I need to submit a score. What do I do? So because schools were sort of caught off guard, just as you were, just as your high schools were with the COVID, they haven't had a chance to change some of their processes, some of their mailing, some of the ways they track your applications coming through. And they may be waiting for you to say, I don't have an SAT score, can you please waive it? So there may be a need for you to proactively tell your school or ask to have it waived. Okay, so I want you to know if you're a senior and a school is still asking you for an SAT or ACT score, you may need to contact the school and say, hey, I don't have one. They were canceled in my area. I can't get to a testing site. And then they'll waive it. So there might be a proactive piece that you have to do there. All right, now let's talk about specifically what I think will happen at the different levels of selectivity. When you're in the high selectivity group, I told you there was a temporary waiver of the SAT and the ACT scores, but what I foresee happening is that those probably will be reinstated for fall 2022 or perhaps fall 2023. What I'm hearing out in my network of colleagues is that some schools do intend to reinstate those scores, and generally speaking, they're at the higher level of selectivity. So the harder a school is to get into, the more likely that they will use that, because they use that as a differentiator in your application. So if you're looking at a high level school, if you're looking at Carnegie Mellon, and I would probably say even Penn State, you should think about, if you're a junior or you're a sophomore, you should think about accessing the SAT or the ACT just in case. Okay, that's the high selectivity group. Now, your grades, as always, are extremely important if you're looking at a high selectivity school. I know that some institutions started to give out pass-fail grades during COVID. If you're in the high selectivity category, there are a chance that they may not look as favorably on a pass-fail grading system. Remember, these are very competitive institutions, so they're looking for any reason to not admit you because they only met a very small pool of students. And here's the ironic twist. So because the scores have been temporarily waived, these institutions are actually getting more competitive, not less, because students are saying, oh, that's so great, I don't need a test score. I can apply to Harvard now because I didn't get a perfect 1600, maybe I got a 1400. So more students are applying to these very very schools, and that makes their selectivity even higher because they're still only admitting the same number of students. So if you're any good at math, statistically, it's making them more competitive, not less. And it's also taking longer for them to make application decisions, okay? I know some of you out there may be in the pool for Pitt and Penn State for this upcoming fall, and I'm hearing from my colleagues, they're asking for second 9-week and sometimes even third 9-week grades. Because they don't have the SAT score in your application, they're looking to see, can you really do it? And so they are asking for more follow-up information, whether it be additional grades, so keep up your grades, or whether it be counselor recommendations or a way for you to prove that you meet the admissions standards. Okay, but that's just high selectivity school. Let's move on to that medium category. Remember, IUP, Slippery Rock, Chatham, Carlow, Westminster, Waynesburg, we all fall in that middle category. And this is where it gets a little bit different from the high selectivity category. The temporary waiver of SAT and ACT scores you might actually see becoming permanent. There are a lot of institutions going through this process. Mine is one of them, saying, we think that we can do this admissions process and we think that we don't need the SAT score. We're doing just fine right now. We understand how to evaluate applications. Waynesburg, for example, we do a holistic application anyway. We don't just look at test scores. So we're thinking about possibly extending the test optional and making it permanent. So you will see a greater portion of schools falling into this category. Watch that space. You'll see schools that are following in that medium selectivity, thinking about going test optional, and particularly for the fall 2022 class, because you're still being impacted by that COVID cycle. So in that case, if schools aren't looking at test scores, what is it in the application that's important? Well, grades are always the most important. No matter what level of selectivity, your grades are going to be important. But we look at a lot of different things in the application. My counselors look at the curriculum. We look to see that you've taken a challenging curriculum, that you're taking college prep courses if you can. We look to see if you have any counselor recommendations, or are there any other materials that we can evaluate, if you have an essay. And by the way, essays aren't just places for us to evaluate your grammar, your punctuation, or your writing skills. They're also places for you to tell us what's happening in your life. And if there are situations that you've overcome, or if there have been things like COVID that have impacted your grades, it's really a chance for you to open up a conversation with the admissions committee. So use that opportunity at schools that have a holistic application process. Finally, you have your low selectivity schools, and SAT and ACT is usually never required, and so that will probably continue. And they're usually open enrollment, as I said, where the only admission requirement will be that you could prove that you graduated from high school. Okay, so let's talk about seniors. I'm not sure how many seniors are in this group, but I have a hunch that there are a few. Let's get down to it. If you haven't applied for admission already, don't worry, it's not too late. I mean, COVID-19 has disrupted a lot, and schools are pretty understanding at this point, and so most have altered application due dates. So if something has passed and you're not sure, you should still submit the application anyway. But the vast majority of the schools, especially the medium and the low selectivity schools, you're going to be fine. You should still apply. It is not too late. Again, most campuses are open for campus tours, but you can also do a virtual tour, not just a visit, but a virtual tour. Some schools have interactive tours on their websites, and they're pretty neat. It's like being in one of those virtual reality sets where you go and you actually walk through some campus buildings. Pretty neat. So those are usually hosted on the university websites. All right. If you're a senior now and you're struggling with remote instruction, and by the way, I've evaluated a lot of applications and I know that there are people struggling, you should talk about that. You should talk about that in your application. Like I said, use the essay section, or if there's no place on the application for you to discuss that, you're welcome to submit things that aren't part of the application. If you want a letter submitted, all schools will accept additional documentation as part of your admissions packet. And I get questions a lot saying, well, how do I submit it? I did the Common App and there's no place for me to do it, or I did the online application and there was no way for me to upload anything. Don't worry. Don't worry, you contact the admissions office and you get an email account, and every single campus has an admissions email account, and you send it through there, and the school will put that as part of your admissions application, okay? Again, most schools are waiving the SAT and ACT requirement, but not just for admission, for scholarship consideration as well. So if in the past an institution have said, well, you need such and such SAT score to get a scholarship, they're not doing that this year. They can't. There aren't enough of you that have taken the test. So it's not just admission, but it's scholarship consideration. It's also consideration for specialty programs like honors programs. Almost all of them have waived the SAT requirement for every single thing, not just admission, but scholarship, honors programs, the works. Okay, let's change gears here for just a minute, because I want to make sure that all my seniors out there, if you haven't already, you should really start thinking about getting this filed, your free application for federal student aid. Now, you're all from Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania state grant deadline is May 1st. However, your school might have an earlier deadline for institutional grants and aids, and you don't want to miss out on any of those things. at Waynesburg, we have a rolling app. We like to see it by May 1st. We still give out aid after that, but there's no guarantee that we'll have institutional funds left. Some other institutions, it is absolutely earlier than May 1st. So you should really think about, if you haven't done it yet, that's one of the things that you're going to want to go home and do with your parents, is the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA. Okay, and finally, I can't stress this enough, but please keep your grades up through your senior year, even after you've been accepted, even after you've committed to a school. Every student has to submit their final transcript to the school. We're required to collect those from the state of Pennsylvania. We're required to have that on file. And you don't want your transcript to come through and you have failed, or you have not graduated, and then the university will have to rescind your admission. Now, it's very, very, very rare that that happens, but I don't want to see anyone in this group here going through that. So just try your best to keep your senior grades up. All right, for my juniors out there, I'm going to start in the same place. Grades, 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 grades. Your junior year is actually the most important year on your transcript when you're applying for admission to a college or university. And that's because you will typically apply in the fall. It can be later, but typically you'll apply in the fall of your senior year. And at that point, when you send your transcript to the college or the university, we don't have your senior grades yet. Okay, and if your junior grades are good enough and you meet the standard, we won't ask for your senior grades. We'll just get the transcript at the end when you graduate. So your junior grades have an outsized influence on your admission status at a university. This is your most important year, okay? Now, next, I want you to think about the level of selectivity and university that you might consider applying to, right? So we went through that list. Are you going to be in the Pitt and Penn State, CMU? Are you going to be Harvard, Yale? Or are you going to be Waynesburg, Carlos, Seton Hill, Sabri Rock, okay? Because depending on which bucket you're going to fall into, it will determine whether you should start even looking at the SAT or an ACT score, okay? Right now, there's still a lot of uncertainty for fall 2022 on which schools are going to require it and which aren't. And a lot of those decisions won't be made probably until after the summer is over. So once the summer is over and we get a good idea of what the COVID landscape looks like, schools will start making decisions about whether students have the availability to attend an SAT or SAT. And right now, they don't, and so schools aren't requiring it. But if that starts to change, what you'll see, schools in a high selectivity, they're going to reinstate that requirement. Schools in the middle selectivity, you're going to see some of them hedging, saying, well, now I don't want the tests. So just keep an eye out based on what selectivity you're thinking about. If you really are thinking about one of those high selectivity schools, I do recommend trying at least to find a place that is offering the SAT or the ACT. If you have the opportunity in your junior year, you'll potentially have the opportunity to enroll in dual enrollment courses in your senior year, or AP courses. So a dual enrollment course is where you get high school credit for a class, but then you also get college credit. And it can be anything from there's an actual college teacher teaching it to my high school teacher is teaching it, and then at the end I have to take a test. If I pass the test, then I get the credit. If you can enroll in one of these classes, do it, because it will save you thousands of dollars down the road, right? The typical cost of a 3-credit course is about $3,000 at a college or a university. If you're able to get an AP class and pass that, or you're able to do a dual enrollment, and some of the dual enrollment classes in high schools are offered for as little as $25 a credit. At a 3-credit class, that's $75. So University of Pittsburgh does that. If you could get a math 3-credit class for $75, thousands of dollars it saves you, because those classes will transfer to whatever institution you go to, okay? The AP test as well, although I personally prefer the dual enrollment over the AP, but AP is fine too. And, you know, it's not too early when you're a junior. Whoops. Go back. It's not too early when you're a junior also to start thinking about doing college visits, either virtually or on campus, whatever you can do. But now's really the time that you want to start. Usually your high schools will give you some measure of days that you can go and visit, because in the summer you're going to want to start thinking about, okay, I've seen these, or these are the ones that I want to see, and these are the ones that I think I'm going to apply to. And then in the fall of your senior year is really when you should be narrowing down which schools you're really actually considering. And then in the spring of your senior year, that's when all the rest of the decision making happens. It's a lot less pressure and stress if you're able to start doing those visits now, rather than trying to cram everything in the end. All right, so my sophomores, I think I have some sophomores in the group. What are some of the things that I recommend? First and foremost, visit a few college websites and get on some mailing lists, okay? Usually they'll have a button that says request information or visit, one of those types of things. There's usually a button even right on the main page, because we want to know, are you interested in our university? And when you get on the mailing list, you will definitely start to get inundated with mailings, emails, sometimes even text messages or phone calls. But what it helps you to do is to start to learn more about the campuses. You might get invited to special programs or learn about special opportunities. And especially for the institutions that you already have an early interest in, you want to do this now, because the earlier you start doing this and getting on the list, the more you find out, the easier your decision will be in your junior and senior year. So you'll probably start thinking about your junior year courses here in the next couple of months. Make sure that you're still enrolling in as many college prep courses as you can, right? We don't want too many study halls. And remember, you know, it's not just seniors that have the ability to take dual enrollment or AP courses. Sometimes juniors do as well, and it can absolutely save you a lot of money down the road. Okay. Now, PSATs are a little bit confusing right now, because the PSAT is offered by the College Board, and the College Board is the company that puts out the SAT, right? The pre-SAT, SAT. And the PSAT test, if you take it, it's both just a practice for the SAT so that you get to see what it's like. It's a nice opportunity for you to try it out without ever having any consequences to getting a score. You know, if you get a bad score, no big deal. That never goes anywhere, nothing happens. But it also is an opportunity for you to qualify for the National Merit Scholarships. So think about if you're going to competitive schools or you're a really high achieving student, you do want to try to do the PSAT, because it can qualify you for that extra merit scholarship. It's not clear whether the College Board intends to keep administering the PSAT during COVID. It's been significantly limited, but my guess is that it'll come back full force once the COVID limitations are lifted. But it's not just college admissions, it's scholarships. So particularly if you're a high achieving student, I do recommend that you try to take advantage of that PSAT opportunity. And finally, and this isn't just for sophomores, seniors, it's not too late to do this as well, but develop relationships with your teachers, your counselors, your coaches, your clergy, you know, Mrs. Barrett, for example, because these are folks who can help you. They can write you a college recommendation for you someday. And I have to tell you, when I'm looking at an application, and I'm not sure, based on the grades, if the student can do the college level work, the first thing that I have my admissions counselor do is call the high school counselor. Find out how the student is in class. Were there any situations, were there any reasons why the grades could have been low? Does the student show perseverance? Perseverance is a big deal. And if a counselor tells one of my admissions counselors. A high school counselor tells one of my admissions counselors, look, this person has overcome adversity. Yeah, their freshman grades weren't so good, but look at the junior grades. They've really improved, and the students enjoy to be around and a hard worker and would really fit well at your institution. You better believe I'm going to take a second look at that student, and that counselor recommendation is going to carry a lot of weight in the admissions process. So don't think of your teachers, your counselors, your coaches, don't think of these as people that are always giving you grades, but they're people that can help you down the road. So take the extra effort to get to know them and let them know what your goals are, so that if that call ever comes in to the counselor, your counselor can say, oh yeah, I talked to Susie Smith, and I know that she's very interested in your institution, and we've talked about that, and I think that she would be a great fit. But if you don't have that relationship, your counselor's not going to have much to go on. So do take the extra effort to develop those relationships. They mean a lot in the admissions process. So I've gone through the COVID impacts on higher education, especially admissions. We've talked a little bit about what seniors, what juniors, and what sophomores should be looking at. Now I would like to open up and answer any questions that you may have on your mind. I've included my contact information here, and Mrs. Barrett is going to monitor the chat.